Welcome to Mr. Disturbing. Tonight, we're plunging into the dark heart of the Appalachians with some truly unsettling true horror stories. That'll keep you up all night. If you're brave enough, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into fear. My name is Mira Das. I'm 34 years old. I work as a cultural anthropologist for a small research institute out of Charlottesville. Most of my work focuses on oral history, lineage, community memory, not ghosts, not legends. That's what I tell people anyway. But last October, I followed a lead into the Blue Ridge foothills, a fragment in a census record from 1911. A cross-reference with an unpublished journal kept by a traveling preacher, and one shaky phone call with an elderly man who wouldn't give his full name. All of it pointed to a place I hadn't seen on any topographic maps. A village tucked near the Tennessee border, isolated, reclusive, Melungeon. That's the term I'd followed. A tri-racial Appalachian group with a history full of gaps, stories hidden under stigma, centuries of mistrust. I wasn't chasing anything supernatural. Just names, families, stories. But even before I packed my things, something about it felt different. The name of the village wasn't on the postal records anymore, not since 1956. I only found it because of a scanned land deed buried in a state archive. It was called Copper Vale. One road in, no bus line, no cell reception, just a single dirt switchback marked by a weathered sign someone had spray-painted black. I had to hike the last mile on foot. Fog rolled low across the trees. No birds, just that soft, constant hush of wind between bare branches. When I reached the edge of the village, I saw the cabins, old, hand-hewn, log structures darkened by rain and time. A dozen, maybe, most without power lines. I was met by a woman named Alma. She said she was the village's keeper. I never found out what that meant. She was thin, weathered, eyes like a crow's, black, unreadable, said she'd been waiting for me. I hadn't told anyone the date I was coming. She took me to a cabin on the far edge, told me to stay inside after dusk. I thought it was just a rural custom, a holdover, a boundary. I respected it. For the first 2 days, I walked the perimeter. Not many people approached me. I caught glimpses. Older women at windows, children who turned away quickly. The men kept to the woods. I asked Alma why they wouldn't speak. She said, "We remember more when we stay silent." I wrote it down. I thought it was poetic, but it didn't sit right. Not with the way they watched me, not with how the wind never shifted, not with how the trees all bent toward the center of the valley. I interviewed Alma each morning. She spoke about copper, about skin and sickness and God, but always indirectly. Their stories turned back on themselves, half-formed, fragmented. She told me they were descended from something older than records, that the Melungeon bloodline ran deeper than migration, that it came up from the rock. She meant that literally. On the third night, I broke her rule. I went outside. Just after midnight, the woods were dead quiet. No insects, no rustle. The kind of quiet that presses against your skull. I followed a faint light coming from the trees, a red glow like a lantern burning under the leaves. I moved slowly, careful not to disturb the branches. And then I saw it, a circle of people, hooded, kneeling, faces down. In the center was a pit, shallow, no more than 4 feet across, but something inside it shimmered, like copper catching fire. It pulsed, slow and rhythmic, and every time it glowed, the people around it swayed forward. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they weren't praying, not in any way I recognized. They weren't speaking, they were listening. I stayed until the glow dimmed. Then I turned back. I didn't speak to Alma the next morning. I couldn't. I just wrote notes, shaky ones. My hands wouldn't stop sweating. That evening, Alma came to my door without knocking. She looked at me the way someone looks at an animal that's wandered too far from its pen. Calm, but sad. She asked me if I'd walked. I didn't answer. She said, "There are parts of the land that echo. You shouldn't stand in them too long." That night I dreamed of a mouth. Not a human one, not even a face, just an opening in the dirt lined with bone. And I woke up with mud on my shoes. I didn't leave the cabin all that day, not because I was afraid exactly, but because I felt watched, not in the ordinary way, not like someone was outside the window or tracking my movements through the trees, but from underneath, as if the earth beneath the floorboards was pressing up against the soles of my feet, listening to my breath, waiting for something in me to shift, and I kept remembering the glow, that strange pulse, the way the people swayed in time with it, like the rhythm wasn't just a light, but a signal. And when I read through my notes that morning, the pages smelled faintly metallic like blood or old pennies, and the words I'd written about the ceremony looked different, more like they'd been scrawled by someone else, shaky, uneven, the lines dipping into the margins like the paper itself had warped. And I noticed then that my fingertips were stained, not ink, not dirt, something greenish, like oxidized metal, and I scrubbed them, but the color didn't fade. And that evening, Alma returned, as if she knew I wouldn't step outside. She brought me something, a small bowl of dark liquid, thick and warm. She said it was to help me sleep, and when I asked what it was, she only said, "It's what the mothers used to give." And I didn't drink it. Of course not. I waited until she left and dumped it outside, but when I tipped the bowl over, the liquid didn't splash. It rolled out like oil, too slowly, and vanished into the dirt without leaving a mark. And that night I tried to sleep without dreams, but the sound came again. Not from outside this time, not from the woods, but from beneath the floor. A low hum, steady and deep, like something alive turning over in the dark. And I sat up with my hands clutched to my chest, and I listened. And I swear it was saying something. Not words, not language, but a rhythm that moved through me, like it was being remembered by my bones, and I couldn't take it. I grabbed my recorder and my bag, and I went back out. Into the woods, barefoot, not thinking, just moving. The trees opening for me in silence, the same way they had when I was a child playing in the dark and pretending the wind had thoughts. And the red light was there again. This time deeper in the valley, lower than before, near the old copper runoff where Alma told me not to go, and I followed it until I came to the same circle, only this time they were standing, not kneeling, their faces uncovered, pale, hollowed, their eyes dark like the old photographs I'd seen of coal miners blinking up from the tunnels. But their skin shimmered faintly under the glow, like metal folded into flesh, and they were holding something between them. A length of cloth, stained and stiff, with bones wrapped inside, child-sized. And I realized then that it wasn't a burial, it was an offering, and the pit wasn't a grave, it was a mouth, waiting to be fed. And the copper light pulsed again, stronger this time, and one of them looked up, directly at me, and I turned and ran. But the sound followed, not footsteps, not voices, but that humming, louder now, rising from the trees like a song, like a memory. And I didn't stop running until I hit the edge of the village again, where the lights from the cabins glowed soft and yellow like nothing had changed. And when I burst into my room, Alma was already there, sitting in my chair, holding the bowl again, her face still, her hands calm, and she said, "Now you've seen it, you can't unsee it." And I asked her what it was, what they were feeding, what was buried in the pit, and she just looked at me with those endless black eyes and said, "What you call burial, we call remembering." And then she left, taking the bowl with her, and I locked the door and didn't sleep, just sat and listened to the humming, which had changed now, less like a song, more like breathing. and I started thinking about the stories, the ones Alma wouldn't tell me, the ones I found scratched into the back pages of old hymnals in the church at the edge of the woods, fragments about the deep kin, about the ones who sank into the seams and came back with new skin, new names, not quite alive but not quite gone, and I thought about the copper veins that ran under this place. The old mine entrances collapsed a century ago, the way the trees grew in unnatural spirals around the runoff, and I began to realize that this village wasn't hiding history. It was history, breathing and walking and feeding itself in secret, and I should have left then, should have packed and gone before dawn. But I didn't, because something in me needed to know, needed to see. And the next day Alma didn't come, and the villagers didn't look away when I passed. And when I reached the little church again, the doors were open, and inside there was a new circle drawn in the dust, not of people, but symbols, long slashes and loops etched into the wood, glowing faintly red even in the daylight. And I heard something beneath the floor again, louder now, sharper, and when I stepped back outside, the air smelled like fire. I spent that final night in Copper Vale, not sleeping, not writing, not preparing, just sitting in the middle of the cabin floor with every light turned off and the sound of breathing rising from beneath the boards again. Slower now, heavier, like something settling beneath me. And I didn't move because I was certain if I did, the breathing would stop and something else would begin, and all I could think about were the stories Alma hadn't told me. The ones I'd pieced together in half-sentences and hidden documents, whispers about how the Melungeon bloodline wasn't just mixed by race, but by something other. That generations ago there had been a collapse in the old mine, a tunnel that ran too deep, too far, where men found something under the copper, not gold, not gas, but flesh, still warm, still twitching, something ancient, buried long before the land had names, and that the first men who touched it were never the same. Their skin changed, their eyes dimmed, their children were born with voices that could mimic the wind and hands that curled like roots. And the village elders built the pit not as a grave, but as a tether, a place to keep it fed, to keep it close. And over time they stopped speaking to outsiders, stopped marking their dead, and began folding themselves into its memory, offering pieces of their own to it, hair, teeth, children. And I realized then that Alma hadn't been protecting me by giving me rules. She'd been warning me, because once you saw it, once you heard the song of its breath, you didn't belong to yourself anymore. And around midnight, the air shifted, heavy and electric, and the trees outside bent toward the cabin as if listening. And I knew I had to leave, had to try before morning, before the final rite I had read about in that preacher's journal, when the veil thins and the living are weighed, and I packed my recorder, my field book, left everything else behind, and slipped out the back, barefoot again because my boots were gone. And the path was clearer than it had ever been, like it wanted me to follow it, and the glow was already pulsing ahead, brighter than before, red and gold like fire in a lung. And when I reached the pit, the villagers were already there, but not kneeling now, not chanting, just standing in perfect silence, eyes fixed on me, and Alma stood among them holding the same bowl she had brought to my door. Only now I could see what was inside. A tooth, still red at the root, floating in a thick black liquid that shimmered with veins of copper. And she stepped forward and offered it to me without a word. And I understood it was a choice. Drink and remain, become part of whatever memory fed this place, or run and risk being taken anyway. And I wanted to run, I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. And the hum from beneath the earth rose higher, vibrating through my chest, behind my eyes, into my skull. And the pit began to open, not with soil shifting or hands reaching, but like an aperture widening, layers of light folding back to reveal something that wasn't light at all, something that breathed in color and exhaled bone, and I saw it then, not fully, never fully, but enough, a face with no symmetry, no edges, only mouths upon mouths. Eyes that didn't blink but remembered, and I saw my own reflection in it, distorted, stretched thin and long like it was trying me on, and Alma said something then, not out loud, but inside my head, something like, "Now you know what we are." And the next thing I remember, I was walking, daylight above. Me, no villagers, no pit, just the forest path leading back to the road, and I stumbled onto the switchback trail as the morning sun broke through the trees, but nothing felt warm, nothing felt real. And when I reached the highway, my car was there, keys still inside, and I drove without stopping, without speaking, without looking into the mirror, because I was afraid of what I'd see. And I told no one, filed no report, deleted the recordings, burned the notebook in my backyard, and for weeks after, I didn't dream. I just heard the hum beneath my bed, the soft rhythmic breath of something remembering me, and I thought maybe it would fade, maybe I had escaped. But then last week a package came. No return address, no postage mark, just a plain box with a copper clasp. And inside was the bowl, the same one, and it was empty except for a slip of paper that read, "You walked too close to the root. You belong to it now." And ever since I opened it, the trees outside my window have leaned in just a little closer each morning, and the hum is louder now, constant. And sometimes I catch myself swaying without knowing why, like I'm moving to a rhythm I don't remember learning. And I know what's happening. I know the pit isn't just a place, it's a door. And once it sees you, it never forgets. And one night soon, I'll wake up back in Copper Vale, in the circle, and I'll be the one holding the bowl. My name is Samuel Hargrove. I'm 46. I live alone in a small cabin south of Clarksville, Tennessee. For the last 10 years, I've worked as an archivist for the State Historical Society. My work is quiet, paper, dates, ink, nothing dramatic. But last year, I was given access to a box, one that had been sealed since 1902, found beneath the foundation of an abandoned farmhouse on the edge of Adams. No catalog, no tags, just initials burned into the wood, JB. The contents were fragile, pages of parchment, letters, drawings, some burned, some covered in wax. But one journal stood out, leather-bound, water-stained, held closed by iron wire, and inside, stories. Accounts of things no one wanted to remember. Most of the entries were written between 1818 and 1820, but the ink, it hadn't faded. The lines were still sharp, and the final pages were signed. John Bell, Jr. That's how it began. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't file a report. I brought it home instead. Night after night, I read it. Alone. By lamplight. The entries began ordinary. Farming routines. Weather. Illness. But slowly, things changed. On the third page, he mentioned voices. Ones that came at night, scratching at the walls, low and female. And then, things escalated. Pins falling from ceilings. Chairs sliding on their own. The air would change. Cold. Heavy. The family heard growls from the fireplace, knocking from inside the floor. Then, the physical attacks began. His sister Betsy, he said, was slapped in her sleep, dragged from her bed, bruises in the shape of fingers. His father grew sick. The journal became more frantic, the entries short, shaky. And then, they stopped. For almost 4 months. When the writing resumed, it was different, as if someone else was holding the pen. The tone was colder, detached, less human. He no longer called it a spirit. He called it the Watcher. He said it lived between walls, that it hated the Bell name, that it came from the roots of the ridge. I thought it was just madness, an old man unraveling, until I found the map, folded in the back, drawn in charcoal, faded but clear. It led to a section of forest outside Adams, on the edge of the original Bell farmstead. I followed it. I shouldn't have, but I did. It took me into the hills. No trails, just thick brush. The woods there were different. Older, unmarked, the trees bent in odd ways. I followed the path for hours, and then I found it. A small foundation of stone, covered in moss, half buried in the slope, beneath a large ridge choked with pine. A ruin, but the shape was clear. A house had once stood here, but it was more than that, something deeper. I felt it the moment I stepped down into what had once been the cellar. The air changed. The silence became full, charged, and then I heard it. A whisper. Right behind me. 4 words. I can still hear them now. "You read it wrong." I turned. No one was there, just damp stone and wind. But when I climbed back out, the trees had moved. Just slightly, just enough that the path behind me was no longer there. I didn't go back to the foundation for 3 days. Not because I was afraid, not exactly, but because every time I looked at the journal, the final entries seemed different, like the handwriting had shifted overnight, as though someone else was still writing, even though I hadn't touched the pen resting beside it. And I began hearing the words again, not in my ears, but in the walls of my cabin, soft and slow and always just below understanding, like something trying to imitate language, trying to get it right. And my cat, who'd slept at the foot of my bed for years, now hissed at corners, stared for hours at the fireplace like it was breathing, and every morning I woke up with the faint smell of sulfur on my pillow, like a match had been lit inches from my face, and it was on the 4th night that the knocking started. Once at midnight, once at 3, always from beneath the floorboards, sharp and deliberate, not creaks, not wind, but measured raps, like someone counting slowly in reverse. And when I finally pulled the journal open again, there was a new sentence written across a page I'd already transcribed. It doesn't sleep like we do. I know what I saw, what I read, that it wasn't there before. But still, I told myself it was a mistake, that I was tired, that my mind was playing games. But the part of me that had walked into those woods knew better. And on the 5th day, I returned. Backpack loaded, journal wrapped in cloth, flashlight, tape recorder, notepad, the tools of someone still pretending this was research, not obsession, and I followed the same path through the trees. Though I never found the trail again, it was as if my feet remembered where to go, turning without thought, drawn by something pulling just below the skin. And when I reached the stone foundation again, I noticed something new. A wooden post had been staked into the center, freshly cut, not weathered, not old, and around it the soil had been cleared in a wide circle. The leaves and moss swept clean, exposing raw dirt that smelled rich and sour and wrong. And in the middle of that circle I saw prints, not animal, not boots, but barefoot, small and deep, toes splayed wide like a child's, but too long, too thin, and circling the stake over and over like a spiral. And I remember standing there for what felt like hours, listening, waiting for the wind to return, for the birds to start again, but they didn't. Nothing did. Only that stillness, that charged emptiness pressing against my ribs. And when I reached into my pack for the recorder, it clicked on by itself, red light blinking, tape already spinning, and the voice I heard wasn't mine, wasn't anything I recognized, a slow, wet whisper that said, "The roots hold the mouth shut." I dropped it. I admit it. I stepped back too fast, my foot hit the stone, and I slipped, landed hard against the old wall, and in that moment something cracked, not the stone, but the air, like a bubble bursting, and I swear I heard laughter, faint and high, not joyful, not human. And from beneath the foundation came a sound, like breathing through teeth, slow and angry and old, and the ground beneath me shifted, just a little, like something large was turning beneath it, and I scrambled back, heart racing, fingers numb, and I looked down and saw that my hand had landed on a carving, not recent, something old, deep in the rock, a symbol like a twisted knot or an open eye with lashes made of thorns. And I knew then that this wasn't just a house. This had been a gate, not to another world, but to something buried beneath ours, something the Bell family had disturbed and tried to contain. And the watcher, whatever it was, wasn't just some ghost or restless spirit. It was older than that, more deliberate, not haunting but waiting. And that night I returned home and locked every window, every door. But the knocking didn't stop. It got louder, more insistent, not just under the floor now, but behind the walls, inside the chimney in the attic, and the whispering followed me into my dreams, saying words I didn't understand but felt, words that itched behind my eyes and filled my mouth with the taste of iron. And I read the journal again, every page, every scrawl, and I found something I hadn't seen before, a line hidden in the margin beneath a water stain. Almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. She lives where the earth forgets the sky. And that was when I remembered the cave, the one no one talks about. Not the Bell Witch Cave, the tourist spot, but the real one. The sinkhole behind the ridge, the place locals avoid, the one never marked on maps, the one John Bell Jr. mentioned once in a half-page diagram, showing roots that reach into nothing. And I knew if I wanted answers, I had to go there, had to find out what had been sealed, or tried to be sealed, because I couldn't sleep anymore, couldn't think, couldn't breathe in that cabin without hearing my name whispered in voices that sounded like mine, only older, and I told myself I was strong, that this was research, that I had control. But that night I found a doll hanging from a nail on my porch, made of twine and hair, and wrapped in parchment that read, in a hand I didn't recognize, "Don't look behind you when it starts." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't turn around. And in the morning, the doll was gone. I left before dawn, flashlight, rope, recorder, no bag, no food. Because I knew I wouldn't be gone long, not in the way people mean when they say that, and I didn't lock the door behind me because something in me understood that locks don't matter when the thing already knows your name. And the fog was thick that morning, not white but gray like ash, and the trees along the ridge were dead silent, watching, waiting. And I found the old trail easily, like it had been waiting to be walked again, the brambles parting just enough for one person. And I followed it without thought, only memory, down the southern slope behind the foundation, past the hollow where the creek used to run, toward the sinkhole I'd heard about in whispers and warnings and redacted footnotes, the one the Bell family never spoke of publicly, the one they tried to bury beneath stories and superstition. And when I reached it, I didn't hesitate. I just stood there, staring down into the dark open wound in the earth. A ragged hole maybe 15 feet across, too round, too smooth, like something had carved it from the inside, and the trees here didn't grow straight. They twisted away from the hole like hair pulled from a drain, and the air smelled like damp stone and blood. And I dropped the rope, tied it to a nearby trunk, and descended, each knot sliding through my hands like a prayer. And the deeper I went, the quieter it became. Not silent, but hushed, like the air itself was holding its breath. And when my feet touched the bottom, the light from above barely reached, just enough to show slick walls and carvings, spirals, eyes, teeth, layered symbols etched over centuries. And at the far end of the chamber, a second opening waited, narrow, breathing, cool air. And I went in without question, crouching, crawling, feeling the pressure shift around me until the tunnel opened wider into a room I can only describe as alive. The walls pulsed faintly, not visibly, but in the way your own skin pulses when you press your fingers to it. And at the center was a pit, not deep, but perfectly round, lined with stones blackened by heat. And inside it, nothing, only darkness. But it wasn't empty. It felt full, like it was listening, and my ears rang with a sound I couldn't place, a low vibration that wasn't heard but remembered. And I stepped closer, knees trembling, the ground feeling soft and hard at once, like it couldn't decide if it was earth or flesh. And I knelt, stared into the pit, and the air shifted, thickened, and something inside me whispered, "She's awake." And I saw her then, not with my eyes, but with something deeper, a shape rising within the black. Not a woman, not a ghost, but a presence, vast and ancient and terrible, something that had worn faces and names for centuries, had been called witch, demon, banshee, but was none of those things, because it had never died, had only waited, fed by stories, fear, blood. Names whispered over fire, and it showed me things, not visions, not memories, but feelings, her feelings, rage, hunger, betrayal, the fury of something forced into silence by men who feared it, families who tried to bury it. And I understood then that the Bell Witch was never a ghost, never a vengeful spirit. She was a wound, a scar the land refused to heal. And the bells had cut her open, invited her in, thinking they could use her, control her. But you don't trap a storm in a bottle, and you don't bleed the ridge without consequence. And now she was awake again, stirred by my curiosity, fed by my fear. And the journal, the voices, the carvings, they were never warnings. They were breadcrumbs, a trail back to the mouth, and I was the offering, not the witness. And I tried to stand, to run, but my legs failed. My voice failed, and from the shadows I saw shapes, hunched, thin, whispering, watching, not alive, not dead, just remembering, the past made flesh. And I understood I wasn't the first to find this place, and I wouldn't be the last. And the light in my flashlight dimmed, not from battery but from choice, like the darkness had teeth and wanted to feed. And then the voice came again, soft, close, just behind my ear. You brought my name. And I turned, I don't know why. I turned and looked into the pit and saw her eyes, not glowing, not human, just endless. And I screamed, but no sound came, only silence. And when I woke, I was back at my cabin, covered in mud and blood and ash. The journal gone, the recorder melted, the tape burnt through. And my cat, nowhere to be found. And for days I sat in silence, not eating, not speaking. And at night the knocking came again, louder, faster, from inside the house. And one morning I found a symbol carved into my floor, the spiral eye with teeth. And I knew she hadn't left, hadn't returned to sleep, and I was just another vessel, another voice she could wear. And now every time I close my eyes, I see her, rising beneath the ridge, reaching for the next name, and I hear the children whispering her story again, not in books, but in the wind, in the woods. And I know she's watching through me, waiting, and that someday soon someone else will find that box and read her wrong.